Hey guys, welcome to the Hunter Base Podcast. What do Maverick Hunters do when they're not hunting Mavericks? They go back to the base, recharge, and shoot the shit. Hey guys, I'm your host with the most, Zeromaster, and as some of you can probably tell, this is another pre-recorded episode. Reason for this is I was away for the weekend, so I didn't have time to record a podcast with CJ. Now that I'm thinking about it, we probably could have, but schedules weren't lining up, and this happens sometimes, and I'm probably going to be getting more guests in the future when stuff like this happens, but regardless, this is the last of the pre-recorded ones, like the last of the ones pre the release of the first episode. So this, actually, what's special about this one, this is the first podcast episode I recorded back in, February 2017. So yes, it's a little old, it's about a year and a half old, but a lot of it's still relevant, just like the other ones, so I feel that this is a good one. Also, I got a chance to have my first guest. This is back when I was doing a podcast where I want to have a different guest every episode. I dropped that idea, obviously, because I couldn't maintain it, but I did, my first guest, this was my first guest, my friend Michael, who is a friend of mine, ex-coworker, stuff like that, and he's really into tabletop gaming, and I asked him if he wanted to be part of my podcast to do an episode talking about tabletop games. Now, at this point, I had just started doing a board game night with some friends, which it was like a semi-regular thing. In fact, we haven't actually done it in a long time, or at least I haven't been there for them in quite a long time. So it's been a while since the last time I did one. But I was getting more and more into board games, and I still am getting into them, but I'm not really a collector of them. I don't buy board games. I'd rather go to the people who own them and play them. So there was actually an entire board game themed show I was planning to do. I was looking at getting additional cameras. That's never come to pass. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but that was one of the ideas I had. When I was thinking of the idea of doing a podcast, I thought, hey, Michael knows a lot about tabletop games. He's a judge for Magic the Gathering, so he has a background in that, so we could talk about card games, whatnot. He's a big fan of the, I'm trying to remember the group, but his bag that he would always have was for, what's the name of the group? I can't think of it off the top of my head. We do talk about it in the podcast. A role-playing group. So there's a lot of things we want to talk about tabletop-style games. So, yes, this episode might be a little dated because it is a year and a half old. But I felt that it's still something I could release, and something that we could get out there. And it's a topic I don't talk about that often, and I wanted to put something else out. And on top of that, again, this is the last pre-recorded episode. So after this, if I don't have anything in the works, I'm either going to miss an episode, which I hope not to do, or get another guest when CJ is available. So, anyways, guys, enough of my rambling. Let's get into the podcast episode. Oh, one more thing I nearly forgot to mention. This episode is only going to have one waveform. Because this was the first podcast episode I did, I fucked up setting the audio up. And his audio ended up pouring into my mic. I had my mic set incorrectly. So when I do separate waveforms, there's waveforms moving when I don't talk. So instead of having two separate ones, we're just going to have one in this episode, and we'll go from there. So anyways, without further ado, here's the episode. I'm Zeromaster, and I have a special guest with me here. His name is Mike. Mike, can I say your last name, or?
I mean, sure.
Mike Foster. He's a good friend of mine.
I'm pretty sure it's on my Twitter profile.
It's on your you follow him on Twitter. We'll get to that in the promotion segment. So, Mike, why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, as you have so kindly said, my name's Mike.
Mike or Michael? Like, what do you officially prefer?
I'm pretty easy either way. We can go with Mike. Michael is for professional settings and like when I go to the bank or get my passport done. Official capacities. When I got married, I was Michael. But
you have said to me that you have preferred Michael in some instances. So.
Yeah, in some instances, but we're being casual here. We're friends. We're buds. So Mike's good. About me, I mean, I'm.
You're a guy.
I'm a guy. I'm a dude. I do stuff. No, I'm a avid reader. I love books, literature. Spend a lot of used to spend more time reading. Now I spend most of my time hanging out on YouTube, watching YouTube vids, and exploring that.
Don't
big
we
gamer.
all,
I love games. Got a PS4.
Finally. Yeah, you got a PS4.
Yeah, finally got back into console gaming. Stayed out of it for a while.
We gotta play Overwatch sometime.
Yeah, we do have to play Overwatch sometime. I still haven't picked it up. Everything I've seen and heard is that it's absolutely fantastic. Lots of fun, whether you're filthy casual or you're an elite kill lord.
It's got a little something for everyone, and I don't even like FPSs, so that's a thing.
Yeah. Right now, I'm mostly spending my time grinding out matches in the Crucible on Destiny.
Right.
Doing strikes. Still working my way up to do the raid. Looking for some better equipment. I only just got into Destiny. Just in time for Destiny 2 to come out this year. Woo! I was excited for that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Other than that, board games, I play Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
I'm actually a judge in Magic the Gathering, so I run tournaments. For anyone who ever has rules questions or wants to know how to play the game, hit me up, and I'd be more than happy to get you into the cardboard crack.
Yeah, I usually hit up you or our friend Brad about anything ruling that I'm confused on. So I guess another thing, like, I'll just cut in here, and I met you through my brother because you guys were the same grade.
Yeah, high school.
Yeah, and I think elementary school is the first time. Like, I was in high school at the time, but like you would have been in 7th or 8th grade when I first met you.
7th grade, yeah.
And we didn't really connect too much until later because my brother was at this point where he didn't want me hanging out with his friends like a lot of high schoolers are. So
I think everybody gets to that point, right? You've got your friends. You don't want your siblings stealing that away from you. You want to have something of your own.
Yeah, and then he 180'd right after that, and he's like, we don't spend any time together. We should spend some time together. And now he's into a lot of the stuff I do. He watches Japanese superheroes on his own time now. I'm like, are you watching? I walk by, I'm like, are you watching like new season of Kamen Rider? He's like, yeah, I'm just watching some Kamen Rider on my own. I'm like, oh, you figured out how to download a torrent. Good. But no, it's we've had other interactions, and then we started working together at one point. But now your profession right now is officially stay-at-home dad.
Stay-at-home dad with my lovely 1-year-old daughter.
Oh, she's 1 now.
Yeah, a little over 1.
Time flies.
Yeah, she's after her mom. Mm-hmm. Her mom is still number 1. But after that, she's the love of my life, my little redhead wonder.
Who takes amazing passport photos, apparently.
Apparently, yeah. She we went to go get her passport photo done and just sat her down in the cart facing the photographer, and she just dead eyes straight at him, just stared him down. Didn't have no smiling teeth, no looking everywhere, no crying. That was the big thing.
Well, I mean, she's a redhead, so she was probably trying to steal his soul.
I actually heard a really good one. Why don't you ever find redheads in jazz bands?
Why?
Because they don't have any soul.
That's great. Wow, I can't believe she's 1. I think it feels like it was just yesterday that I gave you that like, what was it, like some magic box or something? Because I'm like, congratulations. I don't know what to get you, but I know you like magic, so here's that.
Yes, Alexa has actually enjoyed that somewhat. She has discovered maybe a little too early the joys of cardboard crack. Anytime she sees the magic cards out, she's making a beeline for them because she likes to pick them up and look at the pictures and try and eat them.
I was going to say eating is coming up here.
Yeah, eating is definitely a big part of her magic life right now. We'll see if we can break her out of that. The other big thing I'm trying to break her out of right now is she's showing a real preference for mountains. And yeah, no, we don't know. I mean, she's got the fiery redhead thing going on, so I don't know, maybe mountains and red spells, and
so she's not gonna,
for non-magic people. She won't
be a planeswalker then.
Well, I mean, the place of fiery redhead planeswalker is already filled within the pantheon of magic characters, but I don't know. She could always cosplay when she's a little older. But for now, Dad's trying to teach her that she needs to respect the islands and the blue magic and take all the fun away from the other people at the table.
Yeah, as they do. And as I understand, also your wife is actually like a good luck charm, because anytime you get like a package of cards or something, you let her open them. And
yeah, Shauna, my wife, is not a big player. She's not hugely interested in playing Magic. I've shown her how to play a couple of times, and we've played some games together, but she does love to open up packs. So anytime I go to a tournament, if I win any packs, she likes to open them, and usually she opens up something good. So kind of a good luck charm. It's worked out pretty well so far.
So I'm just gonna, next time I buy like a deck box of something, I'd be like, Shauna, I just need you to open these because I know that you're gonna.
It's probably. I mean, I don't know if the luck extends to other people, or if it only works for me.
You've got to marry her first.
Got to put a ring on it. No, but beyond that, I mean, you can always give it a shot, see what happens. It could be that her pulls are totally terrible for you. But no, we'll see.
These packs must have gremlins in them or something. Goblins and gnomes.
See, you joke about that, but then I'm going to digress back into Magic here keep this whole Magic train going for a second and just totally alienate a huge portion of your audience who just doesn't care. The newest set actually has gremlins as a creature type in it.
God.
So you can actually find gremlins in your pack of Magic cards.
See, with me, and this is going to roll into our topic pretty good, because we're going to be talking about tabletop gaming as our topic, but we might as well take a second, because I knew that we would be talking about Magic at some point. I go in and out of Magic. Like, when they released the Dragon set last year, I was just like, I was all for it, but I was trying to build this Dragon deck, and I know it's like the most impossible kind of deck to make, because Dragons aren't common in Magic. Like, they're rarer cards or uncommon cards. I think there's a few they added that were like commons, like 1/1s or 2/2s or something. But
yeah, it's part of their. So I'm so into Magic. Like I could go on about Magic for hours on different aspects, because I'm totally invested in the game and in the tournament scene. And like I said, I'm a judge, so I know the rules inside out and backwards, and I can always talk about policy and procedure and all of that. But I'm also huge into the story and the lore, and then the actual game development. So, most of my podcast feed, Shauna, or when I'm watching videos on YouTube, Shauna's just like, oh, you should find a really cool YouTube video for us to watch. And then I go onto my home feed and it's like 90% Magic. I'm like, you're not going to want to watch any of this. It's just, but yeah, no, it's a design choice. They've intentionally made dragons kind of, they want them to be big and splashy and powerful and ferocious, so they don't want them showing up at like common. So when you open up a booster pack, especially for drafting, most of their decisions have to do with drafting and with limited. They don't want them showing up very often, so they want them to be a big deal when they do come up. And they went for a very, very long time where they made some really cool dragons that were really powerful, but nobody ever wanted to play with them. So when you mentioned they came out with that big dragon set, it was really exciting, because you did have these big, really cool, splashy dragons to play with. It was a lot of fun.
The ones that were like the poster boys for that set, I got most of them. I'm only missing like one or two. But the problem is building a deck around dragons is kind of difficult, because you can't just be a dragon deck. You have to have other things in there for support and stuff. So I think I realized partway through that I was going to, it was going to take a little more than just, I got some cool dragons. I'm gonna make a deck out of them.
See, but then that depends on how you're playing, right? Because the nice thing about Magic, and I'm sorry, we're going to totally take this over here.
Hey, no, this has to do with the topic. We like originally, just so everybody knows, my original topic that I was going to do for this first episode is let's talk about TCGs. He's like, well, I know Magic. I'll talk about Magic for hours. And I swore that you played Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't know what it was.
The closest that I've really come to Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the endless Yu-Gi-Oh! Like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels app that's out for the phones or something. I don't know. I just get a constant stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! App ads when I'm on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like it's either Yu-Gi-Oh! It's either the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ad, which I cringe just a little bit when I watch it. Just that tiniest bit. Mostly because it's almost like the marketing director who came up with the idea and who did the scripting for it was just like, hey, I know how gamers talk. They say things like LOL or GG in real life when they're talking to their opponents and stuff. Let's just put all of that in there. So I'm like, Yu-Gi-Oh! I can totally understand. People love the game. It's a lot of fun. Right now, actually, if not for the fact that Pokemon has been hugely surging in popularity again, I would have said that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably maybe the number 2 TCG. We're not counting Hearthstone because they don't do actual paper product. But right now, Pokemon has just seen such a huge resurgence. Not that I know much about Pokemon. The last time I played Pokemon trading cards was back in the 90s when it first came out.
I mean, when we were kids, like collecting Pokemon cards, people just collected them because nobody knew how to play the game until the Game Boy game came out.
Yes, and then everyone figured it out.
And then I was like, oh, this is a really sweet game. It's basically Magic for kids.
Because it was made by Wizards of the Coast.
Exactly.
When it first came out. And then I don't remember
now they've got
what
the EX ones, and it's weird.
And I think the Pokemon company itself is making the card game itself directly. Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast stopped making it. I think maybe 5 years after it first started.
And I don't remember. I think the same thing happened with Yu-Gi-Oh! I can't remember who it was. It was it was Upper Deck who was in control of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Konami wasn't happy with how they were handling the game at the time, so they stopped that. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Unfortunately is all based. The difference here with something like Magic is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all based on the anime that's out at the time.
Yes.
So currently we're on Arc 5, which is they just called it Arc 5. Like they're not trying to like hide anything, and it's all about I don't even know what it is, pendulum monsters, and it's all supposed to come together because it's like the first season was monster cards, even though they had fusions. The second season was fusions. Third was synchro. Fourth was exceeds. Now we're doing pendulum monsters, and apparently old characters are coming back to life or something. I don't know. I haven't even watched the anime. It's so ridiculous. I watched. It's funny. I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal, which was the last one they did. It was pretty good, but after a while, I'm just like, it's the same shit all over again. Just synchros all over again. That killed Yu-Gi-Oh! For me, but I still play it on and off.
See, I really loved the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga and the anime when it was first coming out, and it was all about this character who would inhabit Yu-Gi and would force these different games on evil doers or bullies or whatever, but it was always kind of different games, traditional Japanese games in some cases, but it wasn't specifically the card game. Yeah. And then the card game kind of came in and just took over.
Yeah,
that's the end of that.
There are episodes like the lighter with the liquor, and
that was the very first episode. That was dark, man. That was super dark.
Oh, the first one was the bully, hanging the bully off of the side of the building.
Yeah,
the robber with the lighter and the liquor, and that was pretty cool. It was dark, but I think what happened with that is when season 0 came out, like, the card game episode was so popular that they're just like, this is our focus now.
Yeah, this is it. We're doing the card game.
Yeah. Because,
I mean, the territory was really, and this is, again, I'm going to swing it back to Magic here. Segue. At the time that all of that was starting to come out, the field was really ripe for that kind of game. there wasn't, Magic was starting to come out by the time that episode aired. Magic had maybe been out for a couple of years at that point, but the field was really ripe, and people were really interested in that kind of thing.
The other thing you got to realize too is that Yu-Gi-Oh came out quite late for us. I think it was like 2000s is when it started for us. Really, it had been going since '96. So, and the weird thing is, just before Pokemon cards were super popular, we were like, I remember collecting Magic cards. One story I'll remember is that Brock pulled in his first pack Sliver Queen. And some kid, some asshole kid is like, I'll give you a stack of cards for that one card, and he fell for it.
Yep.
And to this day, it's the one card that he's just like, because he's like me, he plays on and off. It's the one card where he's just like, never ever gonna get that card ever again.
I mean, he could always go. That's the wonderful thing about Magic is an incredibly robust and surprisingly stable secondary market. I mean, you can always go buy a Sliver Queen, although I think they're actually pretty expensive right now.
They're pretty rare now.
Yeah.
I was thinking one year, like if I got a really good job or something, I would for Christmas I would just buy one, put it in like a case, like a plastic case for him, and give him that for Christmas. I remember because I've been more focusing on stuff. Like one year I got him a modded Game Boy Advance because he's like playing Game Boy, but I hate this SP. It's all, especially with our giant adult hands, playing a game system like that is
it's I found when we moved, which we're still, I don't know if you would still call it that we're still moving in or not, because we have tons of boxes that we haven't opened up yet. We just kind of shoved them in a room and was like, oh yeah, we'll get around to opening
this for later.
Yeah, we'll open it later when we need it. And now we're 2 years on and still haven't opened it. So, that's fun.
I'm not petting you.
But I was actually going through one of the boxes, and that's my cat Thor making an intrusion, wanting attention. Yeah, I hear you, buddy. I found my Game Boy Pocket.
Nice.
And I was just, cool, slap some AAA batteries in that and see what games I could find, and started playing Pokemon Silver, actually.
Ooh, my favorite. My absolute favorite.
Oh yeah, Gold and Silver was just they were like some of the apex games in the series. Absolute best.
And how perfect that you're talking about it, because they just released yesterday the update for Pokemon Go.
I know.
That includes a second gen Pokemon.
I know.
So I caught a Spinnerack on my way here.
Nice.
So I was pretty happy about that. I'm like, yeah, I got a Spinnerack. And I'm like, it only has 200 CP, but I'm okay with that.
I have not been out hunting yet for any of the new generation Pokemon, and unfortunately my house sits in just the right spot to miss all of the Pokemon.
Well, I mean,
literally you go like a block over from where I am, and there is just tons of them, but wherever I am, it's just like a dead space, like nothing there.
Ooh.
Okay.
I wasn't ready for that, Cat. Tell me about it. I live up, you know where I live. I live up near the end of town, and there's stops around me, but I got to drive to them.
Yeah.
I want to be able to get to them.
Yeah.
It's not like, say, for Casey, who's, if anybody watched my Let's Play stuff, you know who she is. She lives downtown, so she has 2 Pokestops at her apartment.
Yeah,
so
no, that's just not.
Whenever I'm there or getting my hair dyed or whatever, I'm just like, every 5 minutes, just 2 Pokestops.
Yeah, I mean, it could be worse. I could be living out at my parents' house.
Oh, right.
Out in the boonies,
out
where,
the
I mean, I think there's maybe 1 Pokestop within the nearest 10 kilometers.
I actually had to drive over there back in summer. I had to drive over there. I can't remember what. Oh, right. It was is near a camping site out there. And there was one the entire drive there, because I was with my mom and I had to drop her off, and then I drove back. But I was sitting there, I'm like, wow, there's the 1 Pokestop.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not as bad as it is for rural players where, it's so bad I have to walk a block over to try and catch something.
Oh, no, I gotta leave my couch. I hate it when people are like, I caught this in my... you go to, like, the Pokemon Go fan groups, they're like, caught this in my bed. I'm like, you?
Woke up this morning, didn't get out of bed, caught myself a Dragonite. You're so cool.
I've seen a few of those posts from friends, and It's been interesting. So gaming in general is just kind of a thing that we both do, but this will segue into our topic. Tabletop gaming is kind of like, and to an extent, board gaming, actually probably more so board gaming, is kind of like taken the world by storm. It's way more popular now than I think it's ever been.
Oh no, it definitely it has exploded huge over the last couple of years. And I mean, there's some spots where maybe we're starting to see a bit of a bubble, and maybe starting to see that bubble start to burst a bit. But it definitely has been bigger within the last couple of years than really at any point that I think anybody really remembers, especially as far as the quality of the games that we have available now.
Yeah.
Some really thought-provoking games, some really challenging games, really fun party games. I mean, we're not just playing Monopoly anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
no more Mousetrap or Trouble, Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, you do have some of those on there, but just looking over at your game shelf, I'm noticing Pandemic, and that was a game that we played at. I started doing a board game night every Friday. I'm not this night because I have music stuff I got to work on, but I remember like the first time I was there, they were playing a game of Pandemic, and I was just watching. I was like, "This is nuts! This is like a co-op board game. Like I'd never seen that before." Unless you're talking about D&D or Mazes and Monsters. Like
a game where you're playing with the people who are around the table against the game instead of just playing against each other.
And with me, with board games, I've always been kind of apprehensive because if I don't understand a game, I feel like I'm going to be really bad at it. But games like Catan, I picked up really easily. Catan, how do you say it?
I usually go Settlers of Catan, but
Catan?
I don't know. We'll get a German expert in here who can let us know how it's supposed to be
Tweet
pronounced.
at me at Zeromaster with the proper pronunciation. But like, just for example, like my brother is huge into it. He's got like 3 or 4 of the expansions.
Yeah.
Like he will set up nights just to play the game.
Yeah. And I mean, Settlers really is kind of the game that, as far as North America goes anyway, has really started the craze. When Settlers of Catan made its way here, it was, I think, just so unlike any of the other board games that we really had before. Or at least any of the board games that were really popular before. And I don't know who it is who first started really repping Settlers of Catan out, but Settlers is also the first game that really got me being serious about tabletop gaming and board gaming.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, looking at our bookshelf, we have a lot of board games, and a lot more still to come that I'm waiting for in the mail.
Yeah.
Either because they were Kickstarter games, which we'll come back to Kickstarter.
Which there's one I do want to talk about at some point.
So. Or whether I'm just ordering them through the mail, getting it sent from the States. There's just so many options now and so many really cool games.
And I think the main thing too is like something like Catan or Catan, whatever, is it's really competitive too. Like there's I don't know if there's like a competitive scene for it, but like just for example, we were going to set up a Catan night, and of course we invited Casey, and she refused because she's too competitive at that game. She's like, do you want to see me get really upset? And I was like, well, I don't care, but if you think it's going to be a detriment to playing the game, then you don't have to come, sort of thing. So
yeah, my wife and I have to sit on opposite sides of the table when we play. It just, yeah. We're both really competitive when it comes to games.
Yeah.
And it gets a little hairy sometimes. Little bit hairy.
I just a lot of the time just have a fun time playing. Sometimes if I'm losing really, really badly, like it feels like I feel like I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, if every single turn you're not getting any resources, you're not getting to build anything, you don't really feel like you're playing, that kind of sucks. It's one of the things that I don't like about the base game. Some of the other versions of the game, so Star Trek Catan is
just, I see that.
See, and now I'm switching my pronunciation.
Catan.
Potato. There we go. Well, just however we say it. So Star Trek Catan, one of the ways that they kind of deal with that is you have your characters, and if you don't collect resources or you're not able to take other actions, you can always do something with the character card that you have at the time. Right. So it always gives you something to do when it's on your turn instead of just stare at the 3 sheep and 2 brick that you have in your hand and wish that you were doing something else.
Yeah, exactly.
You're volunteering to make the next snack run because it's going to be a while before you can do anything else.
Yeah, it's and I think just switching gears slightly, video board games have become more popular too. Like we all as kids remember Mario Party, and that's kind of where most of my frustration comes in.
I was playing Mario Party just the other night.
Anybody who's subscribed to my Let's Play channel has seen the every year at when we go to Anime North, we play at least one Mario Party game. So that happens. And then not only that, don't worry, that's just a cat. So what was I saying? So yeah, so Mario Party is one of those ones that I always find time to play it. And so it's but there's other games. There's like one that I've shown a lot of people is Fortune Street, which it's been around for a long time, but it only just came to North America and Europe when the Wii came out. It's Dragon Quest and Mario characters, and it's basically if you put Mario Party and Monopoly together.
Okay.
It's a very fun game, and like the first time I played it, I didn't use the stock market, but now I start using it every game because you can make up a lot of money in the game because it's usually first person to 10,000 or whatever the limit is. Wins.
Right.
And you got to collect the suits like you do, like the card suits like Clover, Hearts, all that stuff. And it's a fun game, and a lot of people, like, it's complicated at first when you play because you're just like, I don't know how I feel about this, but as time goes on, it gets really fun. So I think that's become big. It's mostly Nintendo doing it because there's like, there's also that Animal Crossing board game, which I really like, but a lot of people don't. You can get it for like $20 now at like EB because it's super failed. But I think mostly because it required amiibos to play it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And almost all the minigames came out on those Animal Crossing amiibo cards.
Right.
So I only bought 1 pack of those, so I only have like a quarter of the minigames. Do you need to sneeze or something? Or? So that's just an example. I think that's kind of helped a little bit too, because people who normally wouldn't play board games, like myself, like I'm always intimidated by board games. Now I'm more open to things like Elder Sign. That's one that I first played recently. And it's an awesome board game. It's all dice. It's all dice. It's a tabletop game. Both.
Yeah, and so. That's a really fun thing about tabletop games that you can play right now is that you can play games that are all dice, games that are all cards, games where you have the big board and lots of little pieces that you move around on it, like Catan or Pandemic. So the variety of games that you have available right now, there's certainly you're talking about the console games or console type board games, and those can still be really fun, but I don't know. I know there's a lot of board games have kind of moved their way into the mobile space where you can play games like Settlers of Catan or Ticket to Ride is one that my wife and I used to actually play against each other on my tablet.
Yeah.
We had that for when we were going places and couldn't quite bring the board. But I don't know, there's something about that actual physical tactile experience that I don't find translates quite the same way onto a console or onto a mobile device.
Well, just a way to put it, like I like Risk, but I really like Risk Factions, the PS3 game. It's I don't know what it is, but I find it a lot more fun, mostly because like there's not a whole ton of setup, because Risk is one of those games where you've got a ton of pieces that you've got to play. So now there's not like a ton of setup. Like it's just you hit go, you got 5 controllers, whatever, everyone's playing, there we go. But another one, like I mentioned, is I know Catan is on PC because I have it, but they haven't put it on console. I really want them to put Catan on console because it's not always practical to take a board game with me, but if I take a console with a bunch of board game video games on it, that's way easier. So I'm hoping that developers of Catan licenses out for like PS4 or something, please. If it's not already on there. If it is, then I'm take my money.
PlayStation, whatever Sony comes out with next, Xbox, whatever Microsoft is.
PlayStation 7, Xbox 20,000.
Well, no, it's got to be Xbox 2, right? Because they did Xbox One, and now it's Xbox.
The Wii Switch U. I don't know.
sounds like either a Paul Verhoeven movie or a Philip K. Dick novel.
I think the console it has to be on though is Dreamcast 3. Sega, get on that shit. Anyways,
Dreamcast.
with talking about consoles that died 2 years into its life, I think I like the variety we have now of board games, specifically. Well, not just board games, but like you've got your Cards Against Humanity and Apples to Apples like card games.
Yeah, you've got all your really fun party games.
You got like Yahtzee-esque dice games like Elder Sign. You've still got your Monopolies. Like Monopoly has a monopoly on Monopoly. Because how many Monopolies? There's Star Wars Monopoly. There's Power Rangers Monopoly. You can think of a franchise. There's a Monopoly version of it.
I mean, there's, Country of Canada Monopoly with all the moose and the Mounties on the front. And I mean, Monopoly is really, as much as I loathe and despise the game, it still serves as a pretty good entryway into board gaming for a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people have fond memories of it, and it can be transposed onto basically any property that you want to have it on. So,
Now, I'm not a huge fan of Monopoly, but Monopoly Junior, that's my Monopoly game. Like, it just cuts out all the crap that I don't care about in Monopoly and just focuses on the core game. And that's why I think I enjoy it so much.
See, the problem is that people are always too nice when they play Monopoly. And especially when you look at kind of the history of Monopoly and where it came from, and the fact that Hasbro tells a great big fat lie when it says, who actually made up the game in the first place.
You have to tackle Monopoly like you would tackle Mario Party. Everyone around you is your enemy, even if they're your best friends or spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people do this whole thing where, if you have to pay taxes or pay for parking or something, it goes into a pool in the middle, and then whoever gets free parking gets all the money in the pool.
That's so dumb.
That's not part of the rules. Everyone house games it that way, but that's not part of the rules. You are supposed to be cutthroat and dirty, and the game is actually supposed to be this whole big screed on capitalism because you win it by shutting down everybody else and making them pay all of their monies to you, and then you use that to buy up everything else and concentrate your monopoly.
Exactly.
And just make everybody hate you by the time you get to the end.
And generally, if you're not talking about the board game, people hate monopolies. Like, back in the 80s, until Sega came around, Nintendo had the monopoly on games, so they could do whatever they want. They could say to a game developer, you're going to buy cartridges from us for $20 to $40 a piece. You're only going to release 5 games a year, and we have to approve them, and all of our changes have to be on it, or your game isn't on the most popular, only system available at that point. So
we're coming out with this fantastic new game. We think it's going to be a huge success. Everyone's going to buy it. You have to stock it in all of your stores. It's got to be on all of your shelves. It's called E.T. the game. Oh no! Wait.
Oh my god.
That was a horrible idea.
So,
they ended up burying
how
it
did
in
we
the desert.
segue to the video game crash of 1983? Like, how did we segue to that? I don't know how, but one thing I do want to do to get back onto the topic is
maybe you'll have like a blooper reel, and we can cut this and put in the blooper reel.
Man, I'm not that creative in my editing. I just maybe I'll cut 1 or 2 things out, but I'll be like, fuck, damn it. So.
Board games.
So I think one thing to contribute to how popular board games are now is got to be with the explosion of nerd culture in the last 10 years.
Oh, absolutely.
20 years ago, if you weren't a kid and you were into something nerdy, you were people looked at you like you were a friggin' leper. You're 25 and you play Magic the Gathering. Shouldn't you be doing something else with your life kind of people? You know what I mean? But now, TV, video games, music, everything is so ingrained in this culture now that people, just accept it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why one of the factors that makes board games and tabletop gaming in general more popular, because if you remember back in neither of us were around in the 70s, but 70s and 80s, there was a big big scare that Dungeons and Dragons was going to turn people into cultists.
Yep.
Now people play Dungeons and Dragons like it's their regular board game kind of night.
Every week, every Tuesday night. That's D&D night for me and the wife.
Yeah. But like it's funny to think like then you had movies like Mazes and Monsters, which there actually is a game called Mazes and Monsters now, which is basically like Babby's first D&D.
Yeah.
But like if you ever see the movie Mazes and Monsters from the 80s, it's the greatest. It's
Isn't
like
Tom Hanks in that movie?
I think so. It's the entire movie is about demonizing Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, yeah, I think it was based on this story about it was a kind of sort of true story, but partially mythologized of this guy who went missing at his university. Mm-hmm. And for the period in which he was missing, and this was part of what set off the whole craze about Dungeons and Dragons being totally demonic and this whole moral panic around it. It was the fact that he played the game, and there were stories about kids at his university who were going down into like the maintenance tunnels underneath the school or something to play, and I
to make it more atmospheric, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so the movie is actually kind of based off of that sort of maybe over exaggerated true story. But yeah, I have actually seen parts of it, and it's an interesting movie.
It's a part of it's a product of the time. Because a lot of people were just like afraid that because of stories like that had come out, that afraid that it was going to be like people were in cults or devil worshipping and stuff like that. And I mean, part of the problem is some of the advertising at the time. Like for example, one person one reviewer I watch from time to time, Spoony one, when he was doing his retrospective of the Ultima series, Ultima 8, when it was first released, had a pentagram on it.
Well, yeah, and Magic had going back to the Magic Well for a moment. Some of the very early art on Magic cards had similar things as well, and Wizards of the Coast was very careful. Which I mean, Wizards of the Coast, makers currently of Dungeons and Dragons, was very careful to start removing that from the game cards and the imagery. I mean, demons and angels and all of that is still part of the game, but being a little more careful with the symbology.
And I mean, just going to something from our time when we were growing up, Pokemon. Like Pokemon cards.
Yep.
People were like the Pokemon game, not so much. Pokemon cards, people were like, this is teaching kids to like create spells and like, and stuff.
And it teaches kids the evolution.
Evolution?
Because the Pokemons evolve, so it's teaching all those kids about the evolution, which we all know is against God's will.
And it's funny because the Pope had to come out and say, Pokemon is not demonic. It actually teaches teamwork and friendship and important values. You should let your kids watch Pokemon. Not in the words that I just said, but basically in a very nice way said, Pokemon's not demonic, quiet down. So, but I just remember, like, you can look now on YouTube and, like, late 90s, early 2000s, like, if you search Pokemon, religious, demonic, you'll find, like, videos of people in, like, churches, like, being like, Pokemon is the devil. They're teaching your kids to use energy cards to summon demons. And the double colorless energy card, when that came out, oh boy, people were like, this is the Star of David. This is a pentagram. It's just a star.
Yeah, well, I mean, are you familiar with, do you know who Jack Chick is?
Jack Chick?
Yeah, Jack Chick. He's a pretty major figure in southern U.S. Fundamentalist evangelicalism.
Oh, okay.
And he's really well known for these tracts that his company would print off, which they're all available for view on his website, the chick.com website. you ever want to have
Chick.com.
Yeah, chick.com. If you ever want to have a look at these, but I mean, it was a big thing in evangelical and fundamental Protestant churches, where they're basically like these little mini comics that you could hand out to people, or that people could pick up, all about the dangers of homosexuality, Islam, and the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is totally evil, according to Jack Schick. Also, the only good translation of the Bible is the KJV. All of the other ones were influenced by satanic forces embodied by the Catholic Church, who force all these other translations or changes.
Considering the original translation of the Bible is wrong anyways. Like,
it's complicated.
The famous line, "Man should not lay with another man," is "Man should not lay with a child." It's talking about pedophilia, not homosexuality.
Translating ancient Greek and ancient Hebrew is complicated.
Yeah,
we'll just leave it at that.
I'm not smart enough to think about that stuff, but
yeah,
getting away from demons and back.
He had a big. There was a very popular tract out about Pokemon at the time that his company put out.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And again, like I said, if you ever want to look any of these up, for either a laugh or a head shake or a face palm or a head desk.
They made
there's the website.
There was a card game made in, I think it was Europe. It was like the holy cards or something to combat Pokemon cards. They basically they'd have Bible. It was like basically Magic the Gathering if it was made to be 100% like evangelical Christian.
Okay, so instead of
using energies, you use holy points, and
instead of summoning monsters, you summon scripture verses.
Yeah, you would get more holy points by having scripture cards. Okay. So it's kind of a rare game now. Like I think I saw a set on eBay sell for like $200.
Yeah, but I mean that really goes back to showing the power of games, right? Mm-hmm. As a cultural force and as a teaching force as well. Mm-hmm. Where the best way that we can think of to combat this is to let's make up our own game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, it's like when Left Behind was a big thing. They made the book series and the movies. They made the Left Behind video game, which that's a whole different topic. whole different topic.
But I think the other thing is it's just saying where we came from with it. So with me, I think for me, where I came from really was I didn't really in terms of tabletop gaming stuff. I was in high school. I was really doing the D&D and Maze Monsters thing. Sometimes Pathfinder, other stuff like that, but it's mostly stuff like that. I didn't really get into board gaming more just until recently. I've always been just a dice and paper kind of guy for that kind of stuff, and TCGs kind of led me into that too. So, what about you? Were you the same way, or how did you come into fruition with what you do now?
So, I mean, we growing up, we had Sorry at home, we had Trouble at home. We would play, Go Fish, Crazy Eights, all the stuff that people usually do. For me, a lot of my introduction into other board games and other card games was playing things like Dutch Blitz, which if you've never played Dutch Blitz is another fantastically fast and highly competitive game where you can get injured. Yeah, you have cards, and the cards have different colors, and you're creating rows of numbers. Or sequences of numbers, but the cards are all piled up in the center. So you're trying to get the most that have your color on it, so you can make the best.
Oh, okay.
Rows. Yeah.
That sounds interesting / complicated, and I feel like I would be bad at it.
It's actually really simple. I'm not explaining it very well.
Okay.
Really, and this is the way that I'd love to learn how to play games, is just play the game once, especially with a game that can go as quickly as Dutch Blitz can go.
Yeah.
You just play a round of it once, and it's pretty easy to pick up.
Yeah.
From there, like I said, Settlers of Catan was the big one. When Settlers came out, a lot of people that I knew picked it up and started playing with it and went, "Hey, you've got to play this game." So came in, played the game, got really hooked on it, picked up our own set, and then kind of just spread it out from there. And at that point, it just kind of exploded into, all right, well, this is really fun. What other games can I get? So at that point, getting into games like Munchkin, co-op games like Pandemic or Forbidden Island. Forbidden Desert is another really fun one.
Are they related?
Yeah, it's from the same company. It's the same. It's a similar style of game, but with slightly different goals and slightly different mechanical functions.
Okay.
One of them, you're on an island, and the island is slowly sinking, and you're trying to find the artifacts that you need to get off of the island while shoring up and preventing parts of it from disappearing. The other one, you're trying to survive in a desert while you find pieces of like a mythical airship. Like your ship crashes, and then you're trying to find pieces to rebuild it, but you need to also find shelter from the sun beating down on you. And of course, the longer the game goes, the harder it gets because you have fewer tiles to move on, or you have less access to water while you're in the desert. And the games are all about figuring out what, for the roles that you get assigned, what's the most efficient and effective way for you to kind of get through there. Pandemic is like the granddaddy, as far as I'm concerned, of these kind of co-op versus the game games, where you can start off and it looks like things are going really well, and then the deck just hates you.
Yeah,
you get a couple of bad runs, and you just like, even so it's a fun thing when you have games that have different difficulty settings, and even on the easiest setting you can still lose really, really quickly.
Yeah, when I was playing Elder Sign last week, we were playing on like the easiest difficulty, because if we had started playing it like on harder stuff, like we would have lost pretty much instantly. Yeah,
Elder Sign and Arkham Horror, those are also really good examples of those. Arkham Horror is another really fun one. Another really fun game that I've been playing recently is something called Legendary. I really like these deck building games. So Legendary, it actually works with a couple of different properties. This one's actually Marvel Legendary.
Oh, okay.
So you get a couple of different character decks for each player that's at the table. And you mix those and shuffle those character decks together, and then you are kind of building your own deck. Each round you can buy different cards that are laid out to build your deck, and you're fighting against some other opponent from the Marvel universe who has their own deck of enemies and features that occur. It's all really fun and really complicated, but also pretty easy to pick up.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of different dynamics. So there's the really easy stuff that you can pick up as you first start playing, which is, you know what the basics are, you build your deck, you kind of get into it. But the games that are the best, things like Legendary, and even Pandemic, when you're setting up on some of the higher levels, knowing what some of the core strategies are, what sequences of cards you want to pick up, what sequences of moves you want to make based on your role type is in Pandemic, stuff like that, where the games that are flexible enough to appeal to both really casual players and have that extra level of difficulty or complexity that applies to the hardcore, really competitive gamers. That's what, Monopoly doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Monopoly, you just play Monopoly. Trouble doesn't have that. You pop the thing in the middle and you just go around the circle.
We're at a time where there's more creativity now in games, whereas back then all the game had to do was like wow you in some way. Like if you think about it in terms of those games, like Risk is probably like one of the ones from that time that's like probably one of the more complicated games. Like some early board games from like the 70s and stuff like that. It's like some games in there, like was it Dungeons and Dragons is based on Tactics 2, for example, which is like probably a board game we could play now today, but back then you had to basically be, into that kind of like weird sort of calculating kind of stuff. So Risk is one that kind of stands out from the time because it's not, it's not the Game of Life. It's not Monopoly. It's not Mousetrap. Like these games that are just like, oh, this is fun and shiny sort of thing. Let's do this. It actually, you're conquering, which is like, that's why I think I got into Pandemic really easily, because it's like reverse Risk. You're not trying to take over the world, you're trying to save it.
Yeah.
And it just like, the deck just fucks you over every time. like the worst is when you get 3 in one area and then, it's like
the outbreak occurs and then suddenly it's just like, well, I thought we had that under control, but not anymore.
You're about to finish off and then one of them gets 3 and you're like, oh my God. Outbreak. Here we go.
Yeah.
I think I want to finish this discussion topic off with basically, from my perspective, I've been more so on the TCG side. So I've really gotten into other TCGs. Like I played Yu-Gi-Oh in high school. I played Magic and Pokemon. But the ones that I really want to talk about is one that hasn't come overseas yet and has needed to come overseas really badly. The Fire Emblem card game. It was supposed to come out to match the release of Fates, like the 3DS game.
Yeah.
But they just didn't. So I played it because a friend of mine imported the card game, and basically printed off what each card does.
Right, got a translation.
So every time I was like, what does this card do? He'd read the translation list and see it. We eventually figured it out because we just played it so many times. Mm. It's the fastest TCG I've ever played. A game can last 2 minutes. And I'm not talking like you get a lucky draw in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic or something and you beat the game in 2 minutes. It's like a typical game can last 2 minutes. Like a long game is 10 minutes in the Fire Emblem card game. And it's really, really fun. It's super simple to play too. It's just a shame it's not in English yet, because the longest part of the game is reading what the cards do, because you have to read from a translation sheet.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping Nintendo or whoever has control over this game brings it out over here, because they're missing a huge opportunity. Like Fire Emblem's not the most popular game series they have, but they just did. I was shocked when they did a Nintendo Direct just about Fire Emblem, and they didn't talk about the card game the whole time. So they just forgot about it, like it did poorly in Japan or something.
Yeah. And
they're just not going to bring it over, which is really a shame. It's a really good game. If I import the deck and I get the translation, that's a game I got to show you sometime. I don't know if you're into Fire Emblem or not, but
I've played Fire Emblem.
It's really fun. So another one that I've really gotten into, a friend got me into, was Dice Masters.
Yes.
Dice Masters is great because it is a card game that uses everything's based on the dice, but it's multi-franchise. So the big ones right now is there's Marvel and DC.
Yep.
So I have an Avengers deck, I have a Justice League deck, and also other franchises like Yu-Gi-Oh! Are now a part of it. So you can get a Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters deck, which is weird because you can mix and match them. So I summon Iron Man and the Blue Eyes White Dragon. So it's weird, but it's a really fun game. The only thing that kills it is that the booster packs and the actual decks themselves are super cheap compared to other games. Like I think it's like $15 for a 2-player set,
right? Which
is like nothing. But booster packs are only like $2 a piece, but you only get 2 cards and 2 dice, which makes sense because you want to get cards that you can use the dice for. Because the problem with this game and a lot of dice games is sometimes you'll get more cards than you have dice for.
Yeah.
So I remember my friend Kevin would just give me cards. He's like, when you get the dice, you can use these cards, because he had so many duplicates of the same card. So, because sometimes what will happen is you'll get bigger booster packs. So you got bigger ones, which have more cards than dice. So you get 5 dice and like 15 cards, and you can only use like a few of them. So, and then sometimes you will get dice that doesn't match any of the cards in your booster pack. So you're basically like, well, now I've got all these cards I can't use.
I mean, they've got to get you buying that product somehow.
I know, but it's one of those things where it's like, with a typical TCG like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something, when you buy a booster pack hoping to get certain cards, you can just trade the cards. Well, in Dice Masters, you got to trade for dice and cards now. So
yeah.
And dice are way more valuable than cards in that game. So, because dice controls everything. But
yeah, and I imagine that probably any kind of secondary market that would grow up around that is a little more difficult than it is for a secondary market of just a card game, because it's going to be more difficult to ship dice than it is to ship cards.
That's why I typically in Dice Master stay away from booster packs, because I don't know what I'm going to get. Whereas with a deck set, they're cheap. I can get a 2-player game out of a deck, and there's multiple franchises. Dungeons and Dragons is a franchise now that Dice Masters has.
Interesting.
So like, it's just like I'm wondering when they're gonna like become big enough that they start approaching like other things. Like they have Yu-Gi-Oh. Yu-Gi-Oh's a pretty big card game, not like Magic levels, but it's a pretty big card game, like specifically for kids and even some like people in teenage years. But a lot of adults play it too, just like they would play Magic. And I mean, for them to get a franchise like Yu-Gi-Oh is huge. So if they can, who knows? They could go after Pokemon. They could go after like anything if they get big enough. So who knows? Sometime in the future, we might have Nintendo-themed Dice Master games, which would be fantastic. I would want that. Like could you imagine Zelda? A Super Smash Brothers set?
Or Zelda set?
Zelda, exactly. Woo! But like, just think about it. Like Super Smash Brothers in general. Like if they made a Dice Master set for that, they would make a killing. Like Super Smash Bros. is already huge.
Oh yeah, so, absolutely.
Like a card game based on it would be like, and with a franchise that's established, would be fantastic. It'd be phenomenal. But so as we pass an hour in our discussion here, I think I'm pretty much set on what I want to talk about. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of tabletop gaming before we move on?
I mean, the only other thing that I really wanted to address was, so obviously, getting cool new games out and making them available is really only step one. But the other real thing that I think has really gone a long way towards making the board games as popular as they are now is the internet.
Yes.
YouTube and Twitch specifically.
It's good you brought that up. I almost forgot about the internet. I almost forgot about the internet on this podcast. I'm going to be
sorry, internet. No, the fact that it is just so easy, relatively easy to start streaming some of these games and showing how you can play them online. Obviously, the biggest spot in this is Tabletop, the Geek and Sundry show that Will Wheaton does.
Yeah.
And Tabletop has played such a huge role, honestly, in exposing people to a lot of games. They started off with simple stuff like Settlers of Catan, Pandemic, some of the games that we've already talked about, but they've also covered a lot of really interesting games and given exposure to a lot of games that are really fascinating, that are available for all kinds of different levels of play, but it's in a format where you can watch other people play it, you can get a feel for whether or not that's something that's interesting for you, and they show you how to play the game. They give you a demo of the rules so that...
Which for me would be really useful, so yeah, I should probably start checking this out.
If you get it, you spend less time, having to actually read the rule book. If you've watched an episode or even just watch the first couple of minutes where they go over the rules, in a lot of cases that gives you everything you need. Now, if you're gonna go that route, I'd say watch out for season 3 of Tabletop. It's a little infamous now. It took them a while to get from season 3 to season 4 because I don't remember if it was the producer or somebody else. There was a big spat between him and Will because there were some issues as far as the rules being explained incorrectly, the gameplay was wrong, and some kind of shady stuff with as far as how some games got on there. But the first 2 seasons are really fantastic. The 4th season is finally making its way back onto YouTube again.
I'm gonna have to check this out. I think you've mentioned this before. Don't you have a bag from them or something?
Yeah, I've got a Tabletop messenger bag. I started watching Tabletop when it first came out, and I have been such a huge fan of it. When Geek and Sundry first started offering it as part of their shop, I grabbed a messenger bag. But speaking of Geek and Sundry, on their Twitch channel, they have other games days as part of their programming where they'll go on and they'll play different board games, or they'll play different role-playing games. And of course, there's the biggest draw to their programming, which is Critical Role.
Mm-hmm.
Bunch of voice actors sitting around once a week and playing Dungeons and Dragons for
Right.
3.5 to 4 hours, depending on whether they're having the mother of all fights against an elder red dragon or, whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that streaming platforms and YouTube have really given just such a huge voice to people who love all kinds of different things, but especially in the board gaming community.
Yeah.
Where you do get this extra bit of outreach where you can do kind of like the Let's Plays.
Yeah.
Rules demos, here are some really cool things that we've discovered. Yeah. Kickstarter has also been huge. Like I said, I've gotten a bunch of games off of Kickstarter, and these are games that otherwise probably wouldn't have seen the light of day because it's really hard to get funding to start building up this kind of thing. Yeah. And, the usual Kickstarter caveats always apply, but, some of there's a lot of really fantastic companies that largely operate based off of, hey, we want to do this new game. We've come up with this concept. We're just looking for the funding to get the pre-production up for it. Yeah. And once we've done that, well, we can secure it. We can get all the cool perks and stuff sent out to you, and then we can start selling it and marketing it out regularly. So the internet has really played such a huge role in it.
It's interesting you mentioned YouTube, and I'll come to Kickstarter here in a sec, YouTube and Twitch, because the first two things that come to mind is, and these are both video game channels for the most part. There's Angry Joe, who made his own board game with a board game. They approached him about making a board game a few years ago, and it wasn't hugely successful, but it was pretty successful. And I guess part of it is because of his name, but it turned out to be a really good game on top of that as well. Another thing I'd mention is Game Grumps. They primarily a Let's Play channel, but when Susie and who is it? Susie and what's his name? Barry. Susie and Barry wanted to do like a board game show, and they approached their MCN about it. They're like, here's a studio. They were like, we kind of want to do it like a Victorian style thing, and they thought the Victorian thing was like serious. They meant like that's the way we kind of want to do it, like not dressed up. So they got dressed up in Victorian style like costumes, and essentially the Table Flip, which is the show that they did, was basically what I liked about it is they spent a few minutes explaining the rules, and then you just watch highlight reels of them playing the game, which was for me was great because again I've said it probably 6 or 7 times in this podcast, but board games intimidate me because I'm never sure how to play it properly.
And there's something really fun about watching other people have fun playing a game.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in a lot of ways. Like if I went up to if a couple of years back I went up to you and said, "Hey, you know what the most fun thing you could be doing right now is? Sitting in front of your computer and watching other people play a tabletop board game." You'd probably look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah,
but it's weird. It's weirdly fun to watch other people having fun.
It's the same way that I like to see like when people said about Let's Plays, like, what, you're gonna watch somebody else play the game? Like,
yeah,
isn't that what sports is? Isn't that what watching sports is?
Well, okay, that's also fair.
Like
we've been doing it for ages.
It's funny because there was a YouTuber that I watched, Review Tech USA. He does things. A friend of his he hadn't seen for a long time. They talked about things. He's like, they're talking about what they're doing. He's like, what, you still play video games? You're like 30 something. Why are you still playing video games? And he's like, well, you play fantasy football. That's D&D for football. And he's like, it's not the same. Like, we actually do stats and stuff. I'm like, what do you think I do in a video? Like, it's funny because now we're at that point where people are seeing it just as a normal thing. Whereas, like, if you wanted to do stuff like that and not be seen as like a nerd or whatever, fantasy football or watching like sports was your way to go. Now it's like you can watch people do anything. I mean, there's streamers in China who make millions just streaming themselves eating food. That's mukbang. A thing.
Mukbang is so
like it's people like watching other people do stuff.
Forget watching people get naked on the internet. I want to watch somebody eat.
It's millions of dollars to watch somebody eat food. Like it's ridiculous. But going over to Kickstarter, there actually is a game that somebody introduced me to yesterday that was successfully funded on Kickstarter, and it's local to us. It's called Mint Box. It's like
Okay.
a little Mint Box or something like that. I'm sure I'll put the correct thing in here somewhere.
Link
It's
in the
basically
doobly-doo.
it's basically like a little mint, those little mint tins that you have, and you had wooden mints, and there's cards, and the mints are just like tokens to play the game, and it's like a 4 or 5, 6 player game or something like that.
Okay.
And it's all based on the cards and little things, and it carried, and the whole thing gimmick of it is it fits in a mint tin.
Okay.
Like one of
so
those-
so something really portable.
Yeah, it's super portable. A big gaming thing in Oshawa gave it like 5 stars because they got early access to it. I'm hoping, and maybe if the creators of the game hear this podcast, that I can get a review copy. So if I do that, we'll have to do something with it, because it's funny you were also talking about watching people play games, because I was approached by a couple other people who like do board games. They're like, we should do some kind of YouTube show about board games. So that might be something that might be happening soon in the near future. Because I'm well, I wouldn't say famous, but I'm notorious on the internet for not sticking to one thing, to changing up what I want to do all the time. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's probably going to be it for our topic, unless there's anything else you want to talk about at this point. So
No,
I think
other than to say, get out there and play some games.
get out there and play some games. That's what I had to do to myself now every Friday, except of course for this Friday. I have a board game night, so because I have a friend who has a ton of freaking board games. So I'm just like, oh, what's this game? He's like, all right, let's pull that one off the shelf, sort of thing. So, all right, so I asked for questions on Facebook and Twitter. So I've got a few questions. I'm going to start with Facebook. So the first question I have is from a friend of mine, Bo. His question is, have either of you ever played Warhammer 40k tabletop? If so, what faction is Bay? I've never played Warhammer. I've wanted to. It looks really cool, but I feel like I'd be spending a ton of money to play it now.
Yeah, this is going to sound really funny coming from somebody who plays Magic the Gathering, but Warhammer is just way too expensive for me to get into.
It's really expensive. Like the video games, maybe the Warhammer video games I could see, but like TCGs are expensive enough. So getting into something like Warhammer, maybe we're not the best to talk about it, but I do see, going back to what you were saying about YouTube channels, there was somebody at a place I worked, they spent every lunch period watching people play Warhammer on YouTube. That was how they wanted to spend their time. So no, Thor, I'm busy doing a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched people play lots of Warhammer. The local game store.
Yeah.
Prior to the renovations that they've been going through,
there's always a Warhammer game going on in there.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
You could usually walk in, people would have the giant, basically like suitcases full of figures that they've been carting around with them, who are playing it. They've got their rulers out, measuring distances and all that. It's always looked absolutely fascinating to play. Again, going back to the risk analogy, it's like risk on crack. So I know a little bit about Warhammer.
Yeah, same.
I know that there are things called Space Marines, which I think are part of something called Imperium.
So it's Halo.
I mean, yeah, kind of.
I've lost all the fan base who loves Warhammer now. They're just like, how have you not played Warhammer?
Yeah, but Space Marines is kind of the only thing I really know about as far as like factions or something like that. So
I'll say this much: if I win the lottery and I've just got a bunch of money, I'm like, well, I'm not going to say this. I'm going to use this. I will buy Warhammer shit. I will buy just a bunch of Warhammer shit and start playing, because I've always wanted to, but it's one of those games where I should have gotten into it when I had disposable income.
Yeah, that's always the nice thing about Warhammer and kind of the contrast to Magic, because I said as a Magic player, I really can't say this, but Warhammer is really expensive to get into, is that, the nice thing is that in Magic, you some of the cards have secondary value, but you buy all of this stuff and you really just end up with a lot of cardboard. Like I've got boxes and boxes of cards down in my basement that, all of them on a secondary market would be worth like less than a cent. We're talking like for a box that has 1,000 cards in it, maybe I could get $1 for it. And I have spent, I don't even want to think about how much money to get all of that.
Does anybody really want to think about how much?
No.
I remember saying in a Let's Play part that I did recently that I once dropped $350 on Yu-Gi-Oh cards at once. Like those were the days when I could spend that much money.
Yeah.
Like that was my paycheck because I was working part-time at that point. I think it was in high school at that point. I basically dropped my entire paycheck on Yu-Gi-Oh! And I instantly regretted it afterwards. I'm like, wow, I spent way too much money today.
So, I mean, to Warhammer's credit and other similar desktop games, tabletop games, desktop games, PC Master Race.
I knew that was going to come.
Other similar tabletop games is that, you invest in those figures and it's not like they're going to rotate out.
Yeah.
You put the time and energy into using them and you can keep those and you can just keep playing with them over and over again. And, when you're done with them, you can probably sell them for similar value to somebody who's just getting into it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where that's interesting about like comparing like a TCG to like a game like Warhammer's. There's no rotation.
No.
Like you're going to be able to use those things forever if you wanted to, or until they fall apart. So
yeah, and it's not, and it's also not like you get, figures in your tabletop game that are completely unplayable, right? Mm-hmm. Like there are so many Magic cards that you read them and it's just like, this card is never gonna do anything ever.
I could maybe play this card in traditional, but that's it.
It's just, oh boy, yeah.
You get cards that are so overpowered by today's standards. Like, add 20 life to yourself. It's like, I could never play this ever. But there is another Warhammer related question, which I don't know we're going to be able to answer. But Maddie says Necrons, dude. I don't know what that means.
I assume that's another faction.
That's probably another thing. Thoughts on Warhammer Age of Sigmar? Again, we don't play Warhammer, so we have no idea.
It sounds really fancy.
It sounds agey and Sigmar-y.
You'll to make up for this, you're going to need to get somebody on who knows something about Warhammer.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do a Warhammer episode, play a few games, see what happens, so I know what I'm talking about. We also have from our friend Mike, different Mike, not you.
It's a common name.
Yeah. His question is, who is the real King of Tokyo? And links to the King of Tokyo game.
Oh, definitely. Oh, actually, that's a hard one.
I have not played King of Tokyo either, so I don't know who the real King of Tokyo would be.
I really, really love playing as the Psy Bunny because it's hilarious. But I think it's got to go with the Kraken.
Kraken?
I have so much fun. Every time he comes into Tokyo Bay, it's release the Kraken.
I'm sorry, but like that has to be like release the Kraken is the thing that has to be said. So
yeah.
So another question comes from my friend Bill. Let's see. This question's a little hard to say. He says something on house rules of games like Monopoly and Risk, maybe stuff about different versions of some games and the price comparison value staying true to content. Like, example, Monopoly, Risk, Clue. We pretty much kind of touched on that about house rules, how we just think sometimes it's okay for me and other times I'm just like, so at my tabletop gaming sessions that I do with friends or board game sessions on Friday nights, if we don't know the true ruling on something, they do it by doing rock, paper, scissors to see if we're going to stick the ruling or not. So last time when we first played Elder Sign, I'm like, wait, can I do this now? Well, let's do rock, paper, scissors. And that was their answer to see if a ruling was okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's house rules are complicated to work with. Sometimes you have to do house rules because either the rules themselves aren't entirely clear, or for the people that you're playing with. Something's either too powerful or not powerful enough, so you're kind of adjusting the settings for that. The problem is that if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't do it within a reasonable limit, you can either make things, completely unfun. So if you misjudge a house rule that you're implementing, you make it so that, one class, one faction, one character type, one whatever that you're using in the game is completely overpowered, or you take away from kind of the experience of playing the game until it becomes a grind, and nobody is really having fun anymore. So you have to be careful with house rules. Like I said, the whole thing with Monopoly and with the free parking and the extra cash flow, Monopoly is all about restricting the cash flow, because that's how the game ends.
Yeah,
if there's too much money floating around, you're going to play for 3 hours and you'll be looking at each other and it's like, well, this is never going to end. We're just going to keep going into infinity because we're playing too nice. So sometimes you got to stick to the original rules, or else things get a little too messy. But I'm a fan. If you are familiar enough with the game and you know that there's something that's not going to be fun for people who are coming in to play, absolutely play with your own house rule or try out a house rule. Yeah. Because the nice thing about house rules is that you can try a house rule, and if it doesn't work, you just don't play that way anymore.
Yeah. It's one of those things too, like a lot of the times when you don't know how a game works, hey, Thor is biting my sock.
He does like feet.
That's interesting. If they're just learning to figure out how a game works and they don't know what a ruling is, they'll try to make some kind of house rule for it. Like, one thing that they do in the group that I have is like, if there's a new game, they'll play it like 3 or 4 times before they figure out how it actually is supposed to be played. So, because one thing that's interesting about things with TCGs, especially, like rulebooks, I find perplexing. Like, I'll read them and there's like, you need to do it. This is how you need to do this. And I'm like, okay, so do I do it this way? Do I do it this way? Does it go this? Like, they're usually vague enough that it's like, how do I play this game? Like, when they first introduced, what was it? There's something in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it was like monster spells or monster effects. Like, what's the limit on some of these effects? Like, the card would only say so much, so you'd have to guess, or like, go online and check the official ruling on the card to see what it's allowed. And that's why they re-released some cards and rewrote what was on the card. Because so many people would be like, there'd be cards like, what is it? There'd be like Monster Reborn, which you can't play anymore, which is just revive a monster. Mm-hmm. Now you have to have a cost to revive a monster. So it got banned and unbanned and rebanned. Or Yatagarasu is another card, whereas if it attacks, it stops your opponent from drawing a card. Well, that's way too powerful. Yeah, because if you could win the game just based on that. So it is one of those things where additional rulings come into play in that case. But
see, and then you have Magic, which is the other way, which has I think 200-page comprehensive rule document that goes into all the minutia of card interactions and rules, and that's just how to play the game. There are separate documents for what you do at tournaments and what you do at
And I assume this is stuff you have to read.
As a judge, I know all of this. As a player, for the most part, it's largely intuitive. Most players don't need to understand how the different the 7 layers and sub-layers of effects interact with each other, because it doesn't matter. The card works this way. This is how it goes.
Speaking of house rules in Magic, what are your thoughts on mana dump?
Mana dump.
There's two things in Magic that I've always been interesting to me. Mana dump is basically you get all mana at the start of the game. And then there's I need to ask you this one, and I'm glad that we're podcasting about this, is do you draw 7 or 10 cards? Because it's always been either or, I've found, at the start of the game. Is it 7 or 10?
7. So okay.
7. 10 must be a house rule then, because I play games where people are like, okay, do you want to do 7 or 10? I'm like, 7 or 10 what? 7 or 10 cards at the start of your at the start of the game.
Oh yeah,
no,
it's
7.
It's always 7.
So that was a house rule that apparently made its way in my circle of friends when we were kids, I guess. And mana dump was one, which is where you get all your mana at the start of the game, because people would typically make decks and then they put like no mana in them. So people would be like, I never get any mana, I can't summon any cards. It's like, well, that's part of the game. You have to balance your deck.
You have to put lands in your deck. The mana system is kind of one of the most important and figurehead things of what makes Magic. So yeah, I might want to put that in.
It's like me, for example, when I play a hockey game on console, I don't play hockey games that often, but I hate icing. I hate offside. So I'm sometimes like, let's turn it off. And then the game is broken if you turn those rules off.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing with Magic is that internally it has a lot of different checks and balances. Yeah. But I mean, you can play a game where your starting hand size is 10. It just gives you more options off the top.
Yeah.
It doesn't significantly affect the way that you play the rest of the game. The official rule might be that you draw 7 cards, but if your friend group says, hey, we want to play where you start off with 10. Okay.
Yeah. If you're playing for fun, it's fine. The house rules are always for fun. I
mean, if you go from always playing with 10 and then you come out to a tournament and it's like, whoa, you drew 10 cards, you're only supposed to have 7, then it becomes more of a problem. Yeah. But I mean, in most other cases, I think, like I said, there's enough flexibility where if you know the game, you understand the game, and in this particular group it's going to be fun. Play the game the way that you have the most fun.
Yeah.
If that means playing with the base rules, play with the base rules. If that means house ruling a couple of things, house rule a couple of things. Yeah. Don't make an entirely different game.
Yeah.
But, if you can find some tweaks or balances that make it more enjoyable, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think I can agree with that one. So, okay. And the last question is from another friend of mine, Reborn Zombie. His question is, if you play a
Warhammer question?
No.
Okay.
No. If you play a card game while riding a motorcycle, does it still count as a tabletop game? He's referring to Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, where they drove motorcycles for the first half of the series while playing cards. My response to that is, you got to put it on top of something. It doesn't matter if it's a table.
Yeah, I mean, if doesn't have to be a tabletop game. There's nothing that says that specifically it has to be played on a tabletop for it to be a tabletop game. It just usually needs to be played on a tabletop to be a tabletop game.
By the way, don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! On a motorcycle. That's a bad idea. Not only will you lose your cards, you'll probably get in an accident.
General safety and health recommendation, don't play card games while operating a vehicle.
No card games on motorcycles.
Hang on, guys. I gotta shuffle up my deck.
Ah, oh, damn it. Hold on, there's a gust of wind. Hold your cards down. Oh, man. So that's the question and answer portion. So the final thing here for our podcast is promotion and update. So I'm going to, since you're the guest, I'm going to let you promote anything you would like to promote.
I mean, as far as actually promoting stuff goes, like I said earlier, find a game you love and just play more games.
Do you have anything that I guess you're not really one of the type of people who works on something and puts it on the internet kind of thing.
I mean, I've got a couple of things that are in the pipeline that I'm working on. While I'm doing the stay-at-home dad thing, I've got a little bit more time to kind of be creative and work on some kind of more creative projects. I do a lot of writing. I haven't really published any of it yet, but I'm getting to a point where I can almost get some stuff out.
Well, you'll probably be back on at some point, so by the time you're back on, you'll probably be closer in idea. Is there anything that you personally think people should check out? Like anything like specific? Like you talked about tabletop, so we know that, but is there anything else you wanted to specifically promote?
I mean, the big spot that I can really highlight right now as far as gaming goes is tabletop gaming goes is really Geek and Sundry. I've been a big fan of Felicia Day for a really long time. I've been a really big fan of what she was doing on Geek and Sundry ever since it came out, and
A big fan of Felicia Day.
Yeah. See anything wrong with that?
I'm kidding.
I think that there must be something I'm missing here.
Somebody's going to say that I'm a sexist now.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I think that they've been producing some really awesome content, and especially in the board game and tabletop gaming territories, their Twitch streams got a lot really going for it on there. So, like I said, Tabletop's hosted there. They do play games on their Twitch stream, and Thursday nights, Critical Role. So if you ever want to see some people playing Dungeons and Dragons, professional voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, right, Critical Role.
Yeah, you can catch them on Thursday nights on Twitch.
Shit, I need to watch that. I've been wanting to watch it so bad, and I just always
It's a lot of fun. They just had a really big shakeup, so it's almost like starting new right now. So it's a pretty good time to jump in.
Okay, well, good to know. So, I guess what I will go on to is my usual stuff. So, basically, with anything, I've got my social media. Follow me on Facebook at Zeromaster fan page, Twitter at Zeromaster. I'm available on Tumblr now, zeromasterlp.tumblr.com. You can check out more stuff from me on my website, rivercitygamers.com. And I've got several YouTube channels. You're probably watching this on one of them right now. Zeromaster Reviews, I do my reviews, and Zeromaster LP, I do my Let's Plays and my Power Play show. I've got so much stuff I could promote. I could be here for hours. So I will just cut it off at that. And I want to thank you, Mike, for being my first guest. And
it's been a pleasure.
Probably a future guest, because we have many other things to talk about. Our conversations could be podcasts. Like, the conversation we had before we started the podcast, I almost wanted to hit record and not tell you. Because
I would have been fine with that.
Yeah, but still, I'd like to let people know. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Please leave your thoughts down below. Do the social media thing. Share it if you like it. And we should be available on iTunes and maybe Google Play. I don't know about that one, but it will be available on iTunes. Give us a rating. Let us know what you think. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, let me go deal with them.
You can go take care of that. Yeah, I'll cut this out.
Or you can keep going.
Or we can just keep going and just let your cat be background noise. Thor, come on, Thor. Well, I've already decided I'm probably going to cut this portion out. So just this little snippet. That's good for future Clayton's editing.
And Kyle. Something from another podcast I listen to.